All right, welcome. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about some simple math that you can get Google to do by itself, so you don't have to do any of the math in your head or plug it into the calculator or anything like that. This is the reason why spreadsheets were invented, right? To do simple or sometimes complex math over and over and over again, so that you don't need to do it for yourself. It's really this is the kind of skill that I try to teach to my students, because oftentimes in physics we do a lot of the same calculation over and over again, and it doesn't make a lot of sense not to do it in the way that actual scientists would do it. Once they have the basic idea, they don't need to keep practicing it with a calculator. I find that their data gets to be much better if they have something that they can do an accurate job of repeated calculations with. Anyway, so calculations are super easy in Google Sheets, just like in Excel. Let's say, just to set us up here, I have a small class, and I have two assessments that occurred at the end of Unit 1. So assessment number 1 was the pencil and paper test, worth 75 points, and assessment number 2 was the lab practical, which was worth 25 points. So you can see that if you add those two together, the total should be 100 points. So let's say I'm going to type in total unit 1, oops, not that, assessment, and then I'll make sure it says 100 points. There we go. Okay. Oops. I hate it when it's not centered. I wish centering was the default. But anyway, so I want to know what their actual scores are. So I really don't want to calculate this by hand. I feel like I have a lot of brain power that could be used in better ways. So I'm going to go ahead and have the computer do this for me. So what I do then is I start by telling it that I want it to do math. And the way that you do that is by hitting the equals button. So as soon as you hit equals, a switch occurs in Google Sheets, and it says, okay, I know that numbers are coming, and I'm going to have to do some math. So it's kind of a different, it kind of switches its brain from just simple text reporting out to doing math mode. So, excuse me, my cold is killing me today. So let's take a look at it here. How can I just add those two numbers together? Let's just say I want to just add them. Well, once I've hit equals, it knows that a math formula is coming. And so I can go in, and rather than typing in the actual numbers, which would be super tedious, I can go over to the first number I want to add, and I can click it. And when I do, it tells me what the cell location is, B2. Now, because these two added together are going to be equal to 100 points, that makes it super easy. So then I just type in plus and tell it what the other cell is that you want to put in. Now, I could also just, instead of clicking on it, I could type in there if I wanted to. So B3, oops, I'm sorry, C2, whoops, there we go. C2 is the one that I want, which is this guy right here. So I just typed in C2. Now you see that it's colored purple here, and it's got a purple dashed line around it. So that's how you can try to figure out which one it's referring to. Then I hit enter, and it does the calculations for me. Now I could do that. I could type that in for each and every one of these cells, but that is super tedious. So again, the reason why spreadsheets were invented was to be able to do this multiple times. So if I click back in the cell that I just did, and I look at this little handle down here at the bottom, if I put my cursor over it, it becomes a plus. And that plus basically means you can click and drag, and it will do the same things, only changing it for new rows, or for new columns if you go horizontally. So I'm going to click and drag, so I'm holding my cursor button down, and I'm clicking and dragging downward. And what it's doing right now is it's figuring out what the math is for each of those. When I let go, it should calculate everything for you. And it turns out that I made a mistake. So this happens sometimes. You can see when it comes up with this value, it's saying, hey, you're trying to add a number to another cell that has no numbers in it. Why doesn't that have numbers in it? it doesn't because I accidentally hit a comma here instead of a period. So I'm going to go ahead and change it, and look how it auto updates. Hopefully. Enter. There we go. Perfect. Now the one downside for this is that it does actually bring down the other formatting. So like the alternate row shading that I put in earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and change that so I can get that back. I'm going to click in the alternate rows here using my control-click trick. And then I'm going to go up to the paint bucket and choose white. There you go. So it's back to normal again. There you go. Now, here's a problem. At least it's a problem for me because I got a little bit of OCD here. Do you notice this number right here and that number right there? Every other number in there has a decimal place. It goes to the tenths place. I like to keep everything the same precision if I can. So here's how I do that. I actually talked about this in one of the other films, but that's okay. So I highlight everything, and I come up to increase decimal, and I click that. Now it's given me the hundredths place, which I really don't want. So now I go back to decrease decimal again, and now everything has a tenths place. So we're good to go with that. So look at how much nicer that looks. That's just, everything's so lined up, everything's perfect. Cool. Okay. Now, let's say I want to, there's an easy way to do this, but let's say I wanted to figure out what the average was for all of those. And so in the next video, I'll show you about the functions here. If I want to do the average, I can go ahead and click equals again to let the computer know that I'm going to do a math formula. And then I can just add. Now, since I'm going to divide all of this by some number, I want to go ahead and start with a parenthesis. So I'm going to add all these together, and then I want it to divide. So you do the parenthesis first because of the order of operations. So I'm going to click each one, plus this one, plus this one, plus this one, plus, and oops, there we go. You can see each one gets its own color, which is kind of nice. So you can kind of refer back to it that way. 2 plus 8. There we go. Is that 8? D8. Oops. There we go. So hit the end parenthesis and then divide it by the number of numbers that I have. In this case, I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to divide it by 7 and hit enter. And there's my average. Now, again, you've got this number that has precision that's ridiculous. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that, click in that cell, and then come up here to my decreased decimals until it's back to the tenths place again. Okay, so I can do that all day long. What I typically do that with is let's say I wanted to figure out the percentage. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a column here on the left. There you go. So let's say I wanted to know what it is, what percentage they got just on the paper, pencil and paper version of it. So percent on assessments Okay. So how do I do that? Well, I click in the cell, I tell it equals again, I click this, and I know it was out of 75 points, so I want that score to be divided by 75. There we go. Now again, I'm going to look for a percentage here, so I'm going to click back in that cell, and I'm going to take use of this format as a percent button. Click that. There we go. Again, it's got hundredths place. I hate that, so I'm going to go tenths place. There we go. Now, if I want that to happen to all of these, again, I just use my clever little handle, click and drag it down, and there it's given me the average on all of those. So I know who in the class really needs to take a little bit extra time and try to maybe rethink what they did on the assessment one on the pencil and paper version of the test. Looks like Arthur had some problems, but other than that, everything's okay. So usually I would highlight that there, so I remember to go back to it later. And I can do the same thing for the lab practical as well. I could then do all sorts of things like sort. I could come up with an average here, which I'm going to show you an easier way to do in just a few, in a different video, and so on. So there's lots of things that I could do. Functions are much handier than doing the math by hand like I've done here, but sometimes you just need to do it. So hopefully that helps. Good luck. Let me know if I can help in any way.